Okay, we are starting a new topic today that's going to really get into the nitty-gritty of a very important topic, and that is washing meat and dairy dishes together. It's probably going to be a two-part class because I really want to get into this topic, intensely because there's a lot of literature, and there's a lot of different, opinions about it, and it affects us on really a day-to-day basis. I don't think, this is one of the more important classes that we're going to cover. Again, we've been covering so many important topics, not bad not, noten tam livgam. And now this is an offshoot after we've been educated on noten tam livgam. So we're also able to, now we're going to be able to understand this topic a little bit more. We're probably going to get into just this class. We're probably going to lay the foundation of the source work. So if anybody wants to take notes on the side, it's important so that you can know what you're talking about, or you can just listen. But we're going to be doing most of the sources, and then next week we're going to be doing the halacha l'maaseh on different, different items in the kitchen, sink, dishwashers, etc. So let's see. What's going to happen on source number one. So here we go. Source number one. This is the Sefer HaTerumah. Again, this is a quote from the Beit Yosef that I pulled. That's where I got this from. We know the Sefer HaTerumah, very important Rishon, where it says Ke'arot. Here on source one, Ke'arot shel basar, dishes or platters of meat. Sherahatzu otan beyura holevet. You wash them in a basin or a larger pot that is dairy. Vehi al ha'esh, and it's on the fire, meaning you have to wash them in hot water, so it was on the fire. Or afilu en al ha'esh, and it's not on the fire, but vehamayim hamim, but the water is hot. So two options: either the basin itself could be on the flame, which is what is going to give it the heat, the heat to clean, or it's not on a flame and the water is hot. Shahayad nichvet bahem. Now, how hot does it have to be? This is called yad soledet bo. Yad nichvet bahem means it burns. If I try to touch it, my hand will retract. So in that case, what happens? There's two different cases. Im hake'arot v'hayura shnehem b'nei yomo. If the pot that you're cooking in, the larger one that's dairy, as well as the platters have all been used within 24 hours, hakol asur, everything is forbidden. You're not allowed to rinse these two dishes together. You're not allowed to rinse this dish inside. You're not allowed to rinse a meat dish inside a dairy dish if they were both used within 24 hours. The Sefer HaTerumah goes further. Afilu hake'arot mekunahot yafot. Even if these items, the dish and the basin, were cleaned out very well, meaning that you don't see chunks or residue. She'en shum shuman davuk bahen. There's no fat that's stuck to any of them. Even in that case. So the first opinion is very strict. Very, very, very strict in this first case. Sefer HaTerumah. If I have a meat dish that wants to be rinsed off in a dairy basin, which is also back then was another dish, and they were both used within 24 hours with hot water, asur, not allowed. Aval, however, im en hayura bat yoma mutar, right? But if the basin was not used within 24 hours, it is mutar, it is allowed. Ubilvad, as long as shayu mekunahot yafot she'en shum shuman davuk bahen. The only way that you can do that now, if one of them is not b'nei yomo, it's not used within 24 hours, meaning it was used before, a long time ago, then that's mutar. But there's one caveat. What's the caveat? Caveat is that all the chunks have to be removed. So if you remember from a previous sheet when we talked about the Rashba made sure whenever we're talking about any of these cases, a person has to make sure removing the chunks is 9/10 of the battle. When you're removing the chunks, you have so much more wiggle room. I shouldn't say that. It's really half the battle, and the other half is the 24 hours to get there to be negative taste. This is the opinion of the Sefer HaTerumah. Before we take questions, I'm going to want to summarize it, and then I'm going to give you the Beit Yosef. So let's summarize Sefer HaTerumah. Sefer HaTerumah, very strict. I have a meat dish that I want to clean off in a dairy larger basin. So in that case, what do I have to do? If they were both used recently for meat and recently for dairy within 24 hours, everything is not allowed because, again, there's hot water involved. However, if either one of them, right? But here the Sefer Turma says the Yura, whatever you're using, is going to what the larger basin is going to be. It was not used within 24 hours, meaning it was used a week ago or whatever it is. Then it's mutar as long as you take the chunks off. And in our first case, even if you took the chunks off, it's not going to be good. What does the Bet Yosef have to say about this? The Bet Yosef gives us the reasoning of the Sefer HaTerumah. Hizbir ta'am shel Sefer HaTerumah. What's the reasoning of this psak? Mishum delo dame ledagim shalu b'ke'ara. It's not like nat barnat, because you could make the case, Rabbi, how is this not like two transfers of taste? I have meat into the dish and then the dish into the water, and they're sharing the water, but big deal. It's not that's allowed. When we talked about a fish that was cooked in a meat pot, we said there were two transfers. How did the pot become meat in the first place? Let's say steak or roast was cooked in the pot, so the meat taste from the roast transfers into the pot, and then when you put the fish in, the meat taste goes back into the pot. So that's second transfer. We said that fish can be used with cheese. Right? It could be, you could sprinkle cheese and cheese sauce on it. So why isn't it like that? He says, Mishum delo dame ledagim she'alu b'ke'ara. It's not like that case. Deshane hacha, it's different here. She'ke'arot nog'ot v'niflat ta'am mizeh lazeh. They're touching each other. When the person puts dishes in like a basin or even a sink, it's touching the walls of the sink. It's touching the walls of the basin that you're trying to get together. Ta'am sheni ba'isur. And then it's actually sharing the wall. It's not actual transfer, but they're actually sharing that second exchange at the same time. Ve'od, when the taste of the meat and the dairy enter the water together, miyad ne'esru hamayim. Right away, the water is forbidden. And then they go back into the dish and into the basin, and they're making it asur. So I have mixed meat and dairy taste all together that's now infusing and going back into our dishes. So we see that for those two reasons, A, because the actual platters are touching each other, and B, because of now the water is getting infected and going back onto back into the dishes. Therefore, it's going to be a problem, and therefore asur. So that's the Sefer HaTerumah. Let's take questions. We're going to go first with Myrna. Myrna Kavod.
Hi. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm very confused because, like, when you say if you wash a meat dish in a dairy basin, like, what's my sink? Is my sink dairy? Is it meat? Like,
right,
what?
Great question. So, meaning if you use the dairy, let's assume that. So it's a great question. Some authorities want to say the sink is not really this, right? But it is definitely can function as a receptacle to hold, let's say, meat and dairy dishes at the same time. You understand? So in order to adjust it to, let's say, a modern day case, can I use my sink? This whole class is, can I use my sink for meat and dairy dishes at the same time?
Right.
So even if you were to say, let's just say that the sink is not like this dairy basin, right? But let's say it's par, because not really the water goes right down the sink, and even if it doesn't, then it's after it bounces off one or two things. Maybe it could be a cliche. I'm just spitballing with you here, but the point is that you're still rinsing the meat and dairy dishes on top of each other.
So if they were used within 24 hours, I can't.
According to the Sefer Terumah, this is not going to be the halacha l'maaseh, but it's very important that you understand where it comes from, because this is why the Ashkenazim posek that you have to have two sinks.
Got it.
Because they're viewing that the sink is like what, Myrna?
Like
the bottom basin.
Right.
They're trying to say that that's like the bottom basin. So if I have, let's say, if the sink is dairy, or let's say the first time I washed dishes in the sink, it was dairy. My sink is dairy. So now I can't use it for meat dishes.
Got it. Okay.
Good,
right.
Good or no more?
Yeah, no, I have more clarity. Thanks.
Right, no, that's good. That's good. Let's just see. Give me 1 second. I'm admitting somebody in. Okay, good. Any other questions? Okay, everybody seems to be good. Seems to be okay. Let's continue. Okay. Now let's go to source number 2, the Ramban. It saves Myrna a bit, right? Here's the Ramban. The Ramban is holek al divrei Baal Teruma. He disagrees with the Baal Teruma. Upasak sha'mikre hazeh domeh ledagim she'alu b'ke'ara. He says this is a case of dagim she'alu b'ke'ara. This is exactly like nat barnat. I have meat taste that goes into the dish, and then the meat taste that's locked into the dish goes into the water. So who cares? I can do whatever I want with the water. You can even put actual dairy in the water. That's not a problem. It's that, and that now I shouldn't say actual dairy, but you say because really it's parv, right? We really have to say parv. But once it gets into the water, that's it. The water is not dairy flavored water. It's just like the fish. So it's not really doing anything. And this Ramban is really one of the major sources that us Sephardim rely on to say, look, we hold by nat parnat. We said that it's fine. The Ramban here says that it's fine. He disagrees with the Sefer Teruma, and therefore he says that this case is perfectly allowed, and it's not like you're making the water nevela, and it's not really a problem. That's the Ramban. Now we're going to go to the so that's good. Myrna, is that good?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah.
No, all good. I'm saying, but that's really one of the best. That's a great source to allow this for us, right? Now we're going to see even another one. Again, another one of the Shloshet Amudei Hora'ah, the Rosh, is going to now come in and also disagree with the very strict view of the Sefer Teruma. Let's see. The Rosh says, source number 3. The Rosh is matir afilu shnehem b'nei yoman. Wow. The Rosh allows this even if both of them were used within 24 hours. Now it's going to come with some instruction. Now again, the Ramban would say that as well. So it's not like a crazy hidush, but the Rosh spells it out a little bit more. So you got two, top Rishonim already in your camp. But let's see how the Rosh is going to describe this to us and what strings he's going to attach. Vekatav, however, he says, Omnam, however, yesh lachosh, you should be careful, and you should care about and worry. Lefi, shekeshemadihim hakearot, nishar hashuman mima she'achalo bahen davuk. You need to be very careful for shuman, for fat chunks or any chunks of the food that you used on this plate from beforehand. Venogeya beyura, and that it'll touch the yura, v'ne'esra hayura, and it'll make it forbidden. Mehamamashut shel basar shenichnas ba ve'akol asur. He says, but if you're not careful with the chunks, you can go from, he swings the pendulum. The Rosh starts off and says, look, I'm allowing you to wash the meat dish in the dairy basin, even if both of them were used within 24 hours. However, if you're not careful and there are chunks there, and the chunks are being heated up by hot water, and they're touching, let's say we'll take it as a dairy chunk. A dairy chunk is touching a meat plate. Hakol is going to be asur. Everything is going to be asur. Meaning the dairy plate, the meat plate, it's all going to be asur. Because now we're going to say, wow, it's an actual chunk. So the chunk of dairy touched the meat plate through a heating agent of hot water. Now it's going to have, that's almost like a direct transfer. And that's going to make the meat dish asur. And then obviously if it's going to be touching the meat, then that chunk touches the dairy basin, the dairy larger yura, excuse me, and that's going to make that asur as well. So very, very, very difficult. Hilkach, and then we'll see the quote from the Rosh. Hilkach, therefore, en lahatir, you're not allowed to allow this, right? You must forbid it. Ad shiomar, until you say, quote, barili. Now, barili is a term also in the Talmud. Bari means you're certain. Bari meaning healthy. I'm positive. I'm positive. Barili shelo haya shum shuman davukba. I'm positive that there was no fat or chunks that were stuck to the plates. Now, by the way, this is again, if we can teach any of, again, especially in a Sephardic kitchen, if we're going to be matir, one sink, one dishwasher, which we're going to have to see and we're going to have to get to, one of the biggest key is scraping the plates. And again, I see that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that almost all of the households make sure that before they're putting it in the sink, before they're doing anything, before they're rinsing two things even together in the sink, they're they're scraping the plates first in the garbage, and then really we're just talking about residue, not mamashut and not shuman and not any of that. And even if they're rinsing that a little bit underneath the sink, they're doing it one dish at a time, going down the drain. But I'm very confident that people are doing this and that they're scraping off their dishes. But you must do it. Let's look at this star. This is just an interpretation again. My note here, based on how we learned it. Mashma, it seems from the Rosh, she'im shnehem mekunachot, that if both dishes were cleaned off and no chunks, afilu im shnehem b'nei yoman, even if both of them were used within 24 hours, this is mutad. This is allowed. It's allowed to rinse them together in the same basin. Aval im yesh mamashut, but if there are chunks, afilu im rak echad mehem ben yomo asur. But we can deduce that you can't get out of this with the Rosh and say, but Rabbi, let's say I have at least one of them that are not 24 hours. If even one of these plates have been used within 24 hours and there are chunks, everything's going to be asur. You can't get out of it. So let's summarize again these shita of the Rosh before we take questions. The Rosh, actually, let's go back a little bit even further. Sefer HaTerumah says, I'm not allowing this practice. That even if they were not used within, if the Sefer HaTerumah says they're used within 24 hours, the meat dish with the dairy basin, everything is forbidden. If they weren't, then it's allowed, but you got to make sure that there are no chunks. But again, that's very strict, especially fast. I just ate off the meat plates and I want to put them in the sink. And this morning I cleaned out my son's milk bottle, and that was used for dairy. So what's going on? Sefer HaTerumah would say absolutely asur. And it's not. And we saw the two reasons why the Sefer HaTerumah said it's not like nat bar nat, where it's like dagim she'alu. It's not like that because A, they're touching, and B, as we saw here, they have both of the ta'am is both tastes are swallowed up in the water, and the water gets re-swallowed back up. Ramban says nothing doing. It's exactly like dagim she'alu. And if you follow nat bar nat like the Sfaradim, you could follow this. The Rosh gets very technical. The Rosh says, I'm going to allow this case. However, you got to get rid of the chunks. I'll allow it even if it's b'nei yomo, even if both of them are going to be used within 24 hours. If there's no chunks, it's allowed. Mashma, we can deduce that even if there was chunks, if even one of these was b'nei yoman, then it's going to be a problem. So again, according to the Rosh, you must make sure that you scrape those plates if there's going to be any such thing as this case of making sure of washing the meat dish in the dairy pot. Let's take some questions now. Does anybody have a question? Or was the Rosh clear? Okay. Looks like the Rosh was clear. Okay. Let's go. We're going to do, now we're up to source 4. Source 4 is the Sha'arei Dura. The Sha'arei Dura is now going to comment on the Rosh. So we did the Rosh inside in a pretty yesodi way. And we have to say, let's see what happens. So the Sha'arei Dura is commenting on a specific quote in the Rosh. Let's see it. When the Rosh says, asur, it seems like everything would be asur. He says, lav davka, it doesn't mean literally that everything is going to be asur. If the one dish that was not ben yomo, so let's say, again, I have a basin that was just used for dairy. And now I want to wash these dishes, but it was from 2 days ago. I'm lazy with washing the dishes. And this dish that was used from 2 days ago doesn't have any chunks. Lo te'esra haberta kelal. The friend is not, the other dish is not going to be osir at all. Because any taste that comes out of the meat dish that was now only used 2 days ago and has no chunk is negative. He says it by the way, meaning don't do this practice because everything's going to be asur. He means to say, don't get so specific, as we said. He means to say that if the one that was not, if the one that was bat yoma, that was used within 24 hours, that's the one that wasn't cleaned from chunks. That's what's going to be asur. By the way, this will help us for a sink, because if my sink is clean, and even if the sink is not bat yoma and it's clean, then I can use a bat yoma dish. So if I'm careful to, let's say, even people want to be strict, they can even use this according to the Sha'arei Dura with one sink and rotate it and say, I'm going to use the sink just like I use the oven. I'm only going to do dairy in the sink today, meat in the sink tomorrow, and that this could solve the problem. Because again, it seems to be the Sha'arei Dura. Let's summarize this source number 4. Based on source number 3, we tried to say that even if one of them was used within 24 hours and the other one was not, everything would be asur. So he says, relax yourself. It doesn't mean when the Rosh said that everything is asur, it doesn't mean that. There is a chance that if the dish that was not ben yomo also had no chunks, that dish is not going to be able to infect the basin, let's say, that was used within 24 hours at all, because that has negative taste in it and there's no chunks. So that's all that the Sha'arei Dura one second. It doesn't want to be osir that at all. So that's the Sha'arei Dura. A little confusing, but let's just take a look and see if there are any questions on the Sha'arei Dura. Because again, we're juggling a lot of different dishes, but I think that was clear. Anybody here have a question on that? Okay. So moving right along. So now this is the last thing that we're going to tackle until we get to Maran, and that's what we'll start with next week. Because I don't want to. This week, as I said, we were going to cover all the sources, and in the few minutes that we have left, let's do source number 5 and then a brief summary. So the source number 5 is the Bedek Habayit. The Bedek Habayit says, "Uma she'asar b'meluchlachot mehamarak shel basar eno nir'eli." Some opinions, right, that were brought down in the Bet Yosef were said if there was even a liquid marak shel basar. So let's say a person has roast. You ate the roast, and now there's no chunks of roast anywhere, but there's like a liquidy residue that's congealed onto the plate, but it's clearly from a sauce or a liquid. Marak shel basar. Some rabbis wanted to say that that's considered mamashut, that's considered actual chunks. Bedek Habayit says no, eno nir'eli. That doesn't seem to be the case. The only thing that we're forbidding is actual chunks of meat and beef itself. Aval b'marak, but with liquid, lo, we're not going to do that. Umihu, however, im shuman mudbak b'ke'arot, hainu kimo mamashut basar. But if fat is stuck to the ke'ara, that's considered like mamashut. So you have to be careful here. There is sometimes a liquid that when it congeals, it's white, and that's actual fat. You got to try to get rid of that. You got to try to get rid of that from the item, either pour it straight down the sink or pour it into the garbage in order to use, at this point, we're going to see later on, at this point, before you, actually, put it anywhere. So, again, Bedek Habayit is stressing one thing as a kula, as a leniency, and one thing as more as a humrah. The leniency is you can't treat liquid, if it's just a liquid or a residue or water or the carrot juice that was together with the meat soup that you made, and that's on the plate, that's not going to be considered mamashut, as chunks of meat where it could make things asur. That counts as you scraped off the plate. However, if what congeals is actual fat is the fat from the meat is considered as the meat itself. So very interesting and important insight, and something that we have to always keep in mind when we're cleaning off the dishes. So now, after covering all of those sources, right, we started with Sefer HaTerumah, who was strict. which we summarized already. We'll summarize very briefly again. He says that if you want to take a meat plate and wash it in a dairy basin, if they're both used within 24 hours, even if you scraped off the mamashut, everything's asur. If they were both used after 24 hours, then used more than 24 hours ago, then you can use it, but you got to also scrape off the chunks. Ramban disagrees, says this is exactly like dagim shalu b'ka'ara, not parnat. Why did the Bet Yosef highlights, why did Sefer Terumah not say it's like the dagim case of not parnat? Two reasons, because the dishes are touching each other and the water swallows the taste. The Rosh said it's all about the chunks. Got to get rid of the chunks, and if you do that, even if they were two ben yoma, even if they were both used within 24 hours, it's good. Sha'arei Dura says and comments that the Rosh, even though he was Mekel over there, he said if there are chunks, everything's asur. He says relax. If one of them was not ben yoma and no chunks, that could be allowed. And Bedek Abayit, just as we said, highlights that liquid is not considered mamashut, but if it's fat, then it is. So that's just a quick summary. Next week, we're going to tackle the actual halacha from Maran. We're going to see the difference from the Ashkenazim. We're going to see Maran, which gives us a special heter with regarding dishwashers, and then we'll also cross into Magen Ba'adi, the Teshuvah of Chacham Atlu B'Badi. All Be'ezrat Hashem. Before we sign off, does anybody have any questions? It's 12 o'clock on the dot, but I will stay for extra questions. Anybody have any questions, thoughts? Okay, so Baruch Hashem, seems like it was clear. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.